On the big story this morning, we talk about US-Uganda relations, everything intertwined therein. But also at the start, the US elections as they are playing out and their impact on us here in Uganda. Everybody is following these elections, and each time there is a debate, people wake up in the middle of the night to watch, and some are thinking, but you're Ugandans, why don't you mind your business? Well, maybe their business is our business too. So we'll talk that and more coming up with the big story. My guest this morning is Christopher Brown. Christopher is the spokesperson of the U.S. Embassy in Uganda. Good morning, Chris.
Morning, Joel. Thanks for having me.
Sure, glad to have you here. Are you following the U.S. elections?
I don't think there's anyone on the planet with an internet connection, TV, or radio who isn't following this election.
Well, tell me. I'll not ask you who you will be voting for. I'm sure you'll not tell me. But what do you make of the progress so far?
Well, I think this has been an election unlike any other that we've seen, obviously.
Why is that so?
Well, we have two candidates who are very well known. Hillary Clinton for the Democrats, who's been in the public eye for more than 20 years now as a First Lady, as a U.S. Senator, as the Secretary of State. She's held very high positions in the U.S. government for many, many years. On the other side, you have Donald Trump as the Republican candidate for president. He's a man who has been known for 20, 30 years in the public eye as a businessman, as an author, as reality TV host. And so both of these candidates come to the election next month very, very known by the American public, and that's not always the case. And perhaps you're familiar with the saying that familiarity breeds contempt. People have, I think, opinions about these two candidates that are very fixed, which is why you see both candidates having fairly high negative approval ratings or negative ratings among the public. Because
do you think people are being too hard on them, both Americans and people elsewhere, who will say, you've had people say, Clinton has an ethical problem and Donald Trump has a moral problem? Well, and an ethical problem, some will say. Do you think people are being too hard on them, or is reality trickling in that, if you want to stand for an elective position, your past has got to be not a checkered one? And it seems not to be the case for both of these, and you'll hear people say it's a question of who the lesser devil is.
Well, I wouldn't characterize it necessarily that way, but I would say that, who the candidates are, what they do, what they stand for, what they say, what they believe, that matters. So their past behavior, what they say when they're on camera, off camera, giving a speech before 1,000 people or 10 people, all of that matters. But let's keep in mind, too, that they are human beings. They're not perfect. They would be the first ones to tell you that, so they do make mistakes. Are people being too tough on them? I'm not really in a position to say that, but I think voters have a right to know these things about the man or the woman, in this case, who they want to elect to the highest office in the United States.
Were you here during our elections that just ended?
I was, yes.
Tell me, and I know the U.S. gives us quite a bit of money to fund our democracy and human rights, etc., etc. How do you think we are faring? You can try and compare and contrast our image here on the other side. Yes, you still have challenges too, but you have gone way ahead of us. How much progress do you think we are making?
Well, I think Uganda is on the right path. They're making good steps towards true multi-party pluralistic democracy. Clearly, I think you and your audience knows that the United States made a lot of comments about the elections, about certain things that happened both before and after the vote earlier this year. And we say those things because we care about the trajectory that Uganda is on. We care about the future of the Ugandan people. We think it's important that every person, every citizen, be allowed to have their voice heard and represented in the decisions that are made to move this country forward. Uganda has made progress in the years past, considering its history and some of the violence that has taken place here. And there are still things that need to be improved upon, just as in the United States. We've been at this for 240 years now. There are still a lot of things that we don't get absolutely correct, because democracy is a pretty messy system, and you're always trying to improve it. You can always make it better.
As you give assistance to Uganda for good governance, free and fair elections, democracy, and the like, and after an election like the one we have had, given the comments that you have made and several other people, there seems to be a stalemate of sorts, an impasse, if you like. Some people will say the opposition has dug in its heels, we won the election, and so we'll keep defying and protesting and the like. Government says, look, we are the legitimately elected people. The Supreme Court did say so, and so it's a done deal, and we'll do everything we can to contain you, muzzle you, etc., etc. And of course, there's a ripple effect on we in the media too, because sometimes there's a feeling that we are too hard on government and we are buttressing the opposition and the like. Does this concern you people that there seems to be a restive period, politically at least?
Well, I wouldn't characterize it as restive. I mean, clearly, the democracy and governance aspect of our bilateral relationship is important, but it's just one aspect. We give millions of dollars in assistance for health-related initiatives, for good governance, for security. But yes, democracy and governance is one part of that. I think what we would say is that we want all voices represented. And we want to make sure that every part of society has an open and constructive role to play in how Uganda is governed. For the media, that means being able to report the stories as they actually are, but doing so in a responsible manner, not simply broadcasting lies, rumors, and innuendos. We encourage a vocal and active civil society that can represent the desires and needs and issues that are important to Ugandans themselves. And we support the government as it tries to provide services for its citizenry, whether it's in healthcare, education, security, or any other matter. And that involves coming up with not just the right programs and policies, but also building resilience and institutions that can provide those services that the 38 million Ugandans, 75% of whom are under age 35, really need and want and deserve so that they can have a healthy and prosperous future.
From the 1960s, when most of African nations began to receive their independence, aid has kept trickling into Africa. And since then to date, some actually put the figures to the tune of about $2 trillion US, aid from the West to Africa generally. But you see, Chris, when you look around Africa, you try and find accountability for this money, and you cannot get a good hold of it. A few things here and there that have been done, but in totality, it cannot be accounted for. You don't see value for money. You do fund many things here in this country. You've talked about health and several other things. Do you feel there's value for this money that you give to Uganda? Are you satisfied that when you give money for several projects, at the end of the day, this money does what its intended purpose is, and there's proof of results, as opposed to, let's keep helping this country, it's a poor country, and that kind of thing?
Absolutely. There's value in the assistance that we provide. The clearest example of that, I think, is in the assistance that we provide for combating the scourge of HIV/AIDS. You're well familiar with how that disease has ravaged the population here over the years. And now the HIV/AIDS prevalence rate has dropped dramatically in Uganda from what it was 10, 15 years ago. Our assistance helps provide 700,000 or more Ugandans stay on life-saving antiretroviral therapy. It's allowing them to live longer, healthier, more productive lives when a decade or more ago they had no hope. I don't think anyone can put a price tag on life, but I think those extra lives, the years that those people have to be with their families, to live, is something that can't have a price tag put on it, and I think that's where just a small part of our assistance has shown great benefit for Uganda.
Some people feel there's a bit of tension between the US and Uganda in as far as relations are concerned, especially at the top, because many times you'll hear, well, your ambassador, she's said one or two things which many people feel she's saying the right thing. Things that need to be addressed by our government, but then again our president often will rebut and say the US, you mind your own business, you have issues of your own and the like. And so the feeling from the observer on the periphery is that there are issues, there is deep-seated tension. Is that the case?
No, absolutely not.
Do you take what the president says lightly? He has lambasted you people, sometimes in a very hard way, publicly so.
The president is entitled to his opinion. We have opinions as well. Just like any two friends, any two family members, you're going to agree and you're going to disagree at times. I mean, that's a normal part of any relationship. The United States is great allies with many, countries around the world, Great Britain, Japan. We have disagreements with them despite the many things that we have in common. But the fact of the matter is, at the end of the day, the United States and Uganda share many similar concerns. We care about the stability and the security of the East Africa region. Uganda has been, is, and will continue to be, we hope, a partner in that endeavor. We care about the future of Uganda, both economically, politically, socially, and we're working constantly with the government of Uganda to find ways to improve the lives of all Ugandans. So to say that we're in conflict is overstating the matter. Yes, we're going to disagree on some things, but when we see things that concern us, we share those concerns because we care about Uganda. If we didn't care, we probably wouldn't be here.
What disconcerts the president and some other African presidents, and Africans for that matter, is the feeling that the U.S. plays Big Brother, the Big Brother syndrome. That, and I'm sure you've had this. Some people would say the U.S. tries to roughshod over some countries, and especially here in Africa, tell us what to do, yet we are sovereign states, and that kind of thing. You've got issues of your own. You're not the head boy of the world, or that kind of thing. And that's the feeling there is. How do you weigh into that?
Well, I would say I would ask anyone to sit in on a meeting between the ambassador and President Museveni or any other government official, or between the U.S. and Uganda. I think you'll find that Ugandan government officials are very much in control of their own destiny. This is a sovereign country. We have advice, we have things that we would like the government of Uganda to do, but at the end of the day, it's their choice. And we do not force our opinions or our views on the government of Uganda. They are free to make their own decisions. And in many instances, most instances I would say, they do that. And it's within their right to do that, and we respect that.
You see, the kind of trade that we do with countries like the U.S. is not on a leveled scale. We are down here and you people are up there. It's not fair, and many times as Africans, and Uganda for that matter, we have said, you know what, let's make it very simple. It's good that you're giving us all this donor aid and the like, but even away from the aid, make this trade equitable, such that we can trade with you with relative ease, and you do not make it convoluted, totally difficult for some of our products to access your market, even when they are high quality products, that some of them can only access your markets in raw form, then they get processed, and then they return, and they're in our supermarket shelves a lot more expensively, and it gets to be a raw deal for us. Do you hear those concerns?
Certainly we hear those concerns. That's been one of the arguments concerning the African Growth and Opportunity Act, or AGOA, that many Ugandans don't feel that it's been a good deal for them. When in fact, I think anyone who's interested in that program needs to understand what that program is about and what it takes to actually market goods on the international market, particularly in the U.S., where the consumer is very discriminating. They want a high-quality good. They want something that has a lot of value to it. So for AGOA, that opens up the market duty-free to hundreds, if not thousands, of actual products. It's really a question of getting the information out to potential entrepreneurs or business people that they can take advantage. We have those resources available to anyone in Uganda who's interested at the embassy. We have a trade hub in Nairobi that can help people who are looking to enter the U.S. market for any of those products, be it textiles, leather goods, agricultural goods. We're not trying to block markets at all. We want to open up trade. But I think what anyone who's interested in that has to realize is that it's not the United States government that's necessarily blocking anything. You have to actually have a product that people want to buy. And that involves having the market research, having a product, having quality put into your good or service that people will actually want to spend money on. And we can help people devise ways to do that and find ways and get the information so that they can do the paperwork and take advantage of this opportunity.
Still talking the economy and money for that matter, the U.S. has for quite a bit of time been the world's biggest economy, but it has kept shrinking. At some point, things began to get slightly better, but there are still issues. The US is still heavily indebted to date, and China, which is the second biggest economy, is, according to many pundits, slowly but surely about to take over the US. Does that bother you and concern you as a country?
Well, I'm not a trained economist, so my opinions on this matter may not have the fullest weight.
Well, as an American, does it concern you that, who knows, maybe not too long from today, you might no longer be the world's biggest economy?
Look,
that's a possibility.
I mean, from a personal perspective, of course, I always want my salary to go as high as it can and to have the greatest purchasing power. But I think what it shows is that free trade, trade internationally without barriers, can help a lot of countries. You've seen in China, as its economy has grown, more people have gotten out of poverty, more people have more economic opportunities, and that's a good thing. Whether or not China's rise will continue, I think, is an open and debatable question, certainly amongst economists, because many will say that you can't have that kind of explosive economic growth without a correlated political reformation as well that has inclusive political institutions that allow for more people to express themselves and have a fuller democracy. I think we're in a wait-and-see mode on that. As I understand it, China's economy specifically has stopped growing at the rates it had over the last 10 years. But if China overtakes us as a country economically, I don't think that's necessarily a concern. It's more a question of how they act internationally. Do they abide by the set of international rules and norms that the international community, not just the United States, have established over the past 60 years to make sure that countries like China do have those opportunities to grow their economies and provide economic opportunity to all of their citizens.
Let's talk about YALI, the Young African Leadership Institute. It was begun by President Obama in 2013, I believe it was. Mm-hmm. And young people are taken from Africa and mentored and trained in economics, policy, governance, business, and the like. And that is a good thing. But then there are some people that have said, wait a minute, these our young people are being taken the other side and they are being indoctrinated a certain way to come and push the agenda of the US here in Africa. I'm sure you've heard that, but tell us about this program.
Well, let's start with that accusation or that rumor.
Not my accusation.
No,
I'm sure you have heard it several.
Of course I've heard it, but if you talk to any of the 70-plus young Ugandan leaders who have participated in the Mandela Washington Fellowship of YALI, they will tell you that they are not being indoctrinated. They are being given skills. They are being introduced to colleagues not just from Uganda but throughout sub-Saharan Africa. They're having educational and entrepreneurial experiences, meeting people in the United States at universities and businesses to gain important skills that they can then bring back here to Uganda and use in their own lives to help those around them and ultimately the entire country. We've taken people who have developed huge businesses, people who are working for the Uganda Revenue Authority, people who are working in health and medicine. They all go and come back and say their lives have been transformed because of those opportunities that they've seen, because they want to help build this country. They want to be leaders, and the purpose of this program is to identify those young leaders, be they in Uganda, Nigeria, South Africa, Malawi, wherever, and give them 6 weeks of intensive training and networking opportunities in the United States, and then come back here and do good work. And we're seeing that in a lot of different places. And it's a program that I think a lot of people very much are glad to see. They want to see it continue. I believe it will continue into the next administration. And the application process for it is open right now. People have until October 26th to apply for the next cohort from Uganda. You can find the applications on the embassy's website and Facebook page, or you can go to YALI, YALI.state.gov, find the application, fill it out, it's free, and submit it, and hopefully you'll be one of those chosen.
How long away do you see a program such as this go to ameliorate Africa and Uganda as an example? Because there's the feeling that maybe Africa, and for that matter Uganda's biggest problem, is not so much the lack of knowledge about what to do, people actually know what to do. We have got many skilled people in government, but the will to do what they know should be done is not there. And so the skills bit very important, because again we've got a huge lacuna there. We still need to skill our young people and the like. But some feel maybe the energies should not be focused there a lot more if we are really interested in Africa and Uganda, for that matter, get better politically, economically, and the like. That we need to reach out especially a lot more to these leaders who are occupying these positions of influence. They know what to do. I don't know, push them a little bit more. Maybe working a lot more with Ugandans, because again, it should happen a lot more from among Ugandans as opposed to the US coming. And I'm sure you've had some people who say, you know, the US come and take this one out and do this to the other. I don't know, that maybe there should be a lot more of this conversation with the citizenry generally.
Well, look, I mean, the purpose of the Mandela Fellowship and YALI is to bring those skills, to give those skills to Ugandans themselves, to all Africans. Yes, they go to the United States, they meet with Americans, but they're also meeting with people from Ghana, from Zimbabwe, from Kenya. They're exchanging ideas, they're finding best practices. If a Ugandan entrepreneur who's selected for this goes, he or she is meeting other people who might face similar concerns or problems or difficulties. If they swap ideas, that is knowledge sharing. That's building upon the skills and expertise that that person already has. And then he or she comes back here. And if you just have one person, right, who can come back, is energized with what they saw and heard in the United States and talking with their colleagues from across the continent, that one person can talk to his or her circle of friends, and it can grow. We did that for 30 people last year here in Uganda. So those 30 concentric circles continue to build. We'll add more this year. We have, about 60 some odd from the previous two cohorts. All of those are growing, and they're particularly among younger Ugandans, under age 35. As you know, this is a country of young people. Under 75% are under age 35. We're helping them develop the skills that they need to lead this country in the future. And that's when we talk about building the capacity of civil society so that they can represent the needs and desires of the Ugandan people, that's what YALI is here to do, is to help build civil society, help build entrepreneurs and the economy, help build those institutions that Ugandans want to see by giving those who have already shown some leadership and are already doing some good things on the ground, to give them that little extra push on their own initiative. They decide what they get to do when they come back here. This is not the United States telling them, go do this. We're simply offering them a chance to get more skills than they could get here, and then come back and provide opportunities for more people.
You talked about funding for civil society, and again, the President and government officials, for that matter, have severally blamed the West, and the US particularly, for funding civil society organizations, which hound government a great deal. And the feeling from government is that the US is going through people to try and torpedo the choice of Ugandans in the form of leaders, for that matter. How do you respond to these accusations?
Well, that's absolutely not true. Our support for civil society is meant to bolster the voices of everyday Ugandans who deserve a voice in their democracy, in how they're governed. The support that we give during the political season here went to both the NRM and other political parties. We did not single out any particular group.
Anybody else wins, you want to be on the right side, huh?
No, that's not it at all. It's about providing those kind of skills and opportunities to everyone who wants them. There was no political litmus test to that at all. And to the point about civil society, I mean, that's their job, to hold government accountable. And if government is not held accountable, then you see the kind of things that may happen. But in a democracy, people have the right and have the expectation to be fulfilled that their leaders are responsive to them, and that's the role of civil society in any country.
How do you respond to people who will say, well, the US is pushing for human rights accountability in many countries, and especially in Africa, and that's why it is very much supportive of the ICC, that African leaders who goof up, who cause trouble, can be held accountable, but then the US is not subjecting itself to the same accountability processes, not a part of the ICC and the like. How do you respond to people who say that?
Well, I think it's a question of how people are held responsible. The ICC was created in part to hold people who had committed atrocities or other crimes responsible for them, where their local institutions, their courts, their politics, what have you, were unable to do so. So, for example, in a war-torn country where there is no court system or where it's highly corrupt, it would be unlikely that a rebel leader or the like who had committed atrocities or recruited child soldiers, for example, would ever be able to be brought to justice. So the ICC was created in part as an international mechanism, not just the creation of the United States, to bring those people before a court of law and hold them accountable for what they did. Now, the United States has institutions, has courts, both military and civil, that can and do hold people accountable. And that's part of the reason why we have not chosen to be part of the ICC, even though we do support it in certain instances where people who have committed mass atrocities should be held accountable, because otherwise they wouldn't be.
Is that not double standards? Because I mean, what's good for the goose should be good for the gander, one would say. That what's wrong with subjecting yourselves as well to this? Yes, you have your own local system. We do have a legal regime in this country too, but we have subscribed to the ICC, even though you keep hearing our leaders saying we should pull out, which again is hypocritical on their part. But for the US, I mean, what's wrong with saying, all right, since we believe this thing works, we believe it can sort you out, let's show you by practically being a part of it too. If you're giving food to a child for, you're saying, look, this is good for you, I can eat it too. And so you give to the child as well. That should be the same concept, one would think.
Well, again, it becomes a question of how people can and will be held responsible. Our court systems are in place and are very strong and can hold people who commit those kinds of crimes accountable. And our laws prohibit our elected officials and our military from being tried in other courts. So it's a question of sovereignty as well for the United States. And it is a sovereign question for states that chose to be members of the ICC. We did not force anyone to do that. So if they are members of the ICC and have taken that commitment to abide by the rules of the ICC, then they should abide by those commitments.
Christopher Brown, spokesperson of the U.S. Embassy in Uganda. Thank you for talking to us.
Thank you, Joel.
Thank you. Coming up is my opinion. Democracy is 240 years plus. You definitely have every reason to learn lots of things from them, especially if you are 50 to 60, like it is the case with us here, Uganda and several other African countries. So without a doubt, there's a lot that we can and should learn from the likes of the US. And we hope that slowly but surely we keep getting to a level where we can talk at the same platform, if you like, especially to do with trade. Aid, I don't know, aid is not working as well as it should. If aid was doing an incredible job, maybe Uganda would be first world. And that's not to say aid is bad. We are thankful to those that offer aid to this country. If it was not for that aid, I don't know, many people's lives would be in tatters, if you like. So it's a good thing, but as Uganda, we need to get to a point where we grow up. When you are 54, we just made 54 the other day, independence-wise, so to speak. If you're 54 years old and you're still dependent on your parents, by parent meaning now, in this case, the colonial fellows that did hand independence to us, at 54, you're still heavily dependent on them. There's a problem with that. There's a problem with that. We need to grow up. We need to stand up and be counted. Hopefully that can get to happen. And that's it for today's edition of The Big Story. Thank you for joining us. My name is Joel Senyonyi. In a bit, Everyday Life will be coming